Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. Today we are going to be dissecting the brand new Mercedes-Benz EQB. So before we get started, I'd like to position this car in its segment and in Mercedes-Benz as a lineup. So what is this? Just like the EQA before it, the EQB is a electric version of the a lot more conventional GLB. Now the GLB is the more practical choice compared to the GLA in the Mercedes-Benz's range. Both the GLB and the GLA have the same platform underneath. They are based on front-wheel drive platforms for internal combustion engines, and both share a lot of underpinnings. But the GLB was created to be a bit more practical, as it has a more conventional roofline towards the back and it has more storage in the back. Furthermore, the GLB is one of only two models in the Mercedes-Benz's range that can offer 7 seats. So yeah, you can buy the GLB with an extra set of seats in the back. However, this is the EQB, and the EQB is an electric version. That means under the floor over here, in between the axles, we have a huge battery pack. Furthermore, we don't have an internal combustion engine under the hood anymore, and we don't have an extra storage space either. It's just an empty space over there. So that's what the EQB is the electric version of the GLB. And it competes with the electric version of the X1 that's going to come out later this year. It's going to compete with the electric version of the Q3 if it ever comes out, and so on. For now, it's quite unmatched by traditional German cars. You could consider the Mustang Mach-E as a rival for this car. You could consider the ID.4 a rival for this car. You could consider the Skoda Enyaq a rival for this car. And you could also consider the Tesla Model Y as a rival for the EQB. Now, the car we're driving today is an Edition 1 model, which means it comes with a couple of interesting features. For example, we have these badges over here, and we have the rosé gold wheels in 20-inch size. These are pretty much huge wheels for a car of this size. It's 4.7 meters, almost 4.7 meters in length, and these are some pretty big wheels, as I already said. Now, in terms of design, you'll notice that up front we have a couple of interesting changes compared to the regular GLB. For starters, we have different headlights with the traditional signature for electric cars and a blocked out grille. Now, on top of this grille, we have a light bar that connects the two headlights in typical Mercedes EQ fashion. Furthermore, we have the AMG package on this car, so we have some aggressive styling on the front bumper, but not too much in order to disrupt the aerodynamics of the car. Otherwise, this car is pretty straightforward. I like the fact that we have doors that cover the door sills in order to protect your pants whenever the car is dirty, as it happens today because it has been raining cats and dogs recently. Moving around the back, we have a beautiful design for the tail lamps and a light bar connecting them as well. And the boot is quite big. It has 491 liters of space and a flush loading bay. So it will be pretty easy to get your stuff in and out, but it is smaller than on a regular GLB. Inside the cabin, it's the same old story. It's basically the same design as you would find not only in the GLB, but also a lot of the Mercedes-Benz range up to the C-Class. So we have the same general layout for the dashboard. We have these two displays over here that play certain roles. So we have one for the instrument cluster and one for the infotainment system. And the infotainment system, since I mentioned it, is the same as on most Mercedes-Benz models today. It's the MBUX. So it works pretty well. We already know it a lot, and I have to say that somehow these screens do seem a bit too small for this car. I never thought I would say that. Maybe I got used to the hyper screen in the EQS, but yeah, they do seem a bit small compared to what we have in the industry today. Furthermore, when you use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay on the multimedia screen over here, it's not, either of those systems are not displayed on the full screen. So they are basically covering like the middle half of the area available. So that's quite weird. As for the instrument cluster, well, it looks good, the graphics are good, it moves rather well, the animations are smooth, nothing to complain about. The one thing I don't like inside this cabin is the fact that we have a lot of glossy black plastics around that mimic, you know, piano black, the classical piano black. We have them around the air vents over here on the center console. So they will gather a lot of dust and fingerprints, and they will get scratched up over the years. Furthermore, the plastic used from the half of the dashboard downwards is a bit scratchy. Doesn't feel all that premium as you would expect in a Mercedes-Benz. The car does make up for it with soft touch plastics on the door panels, on the dash, so it's a mixed bag in terms of the materials used. The steering wheel is a highlight because, as I said, we have the AMG package on this car, and the steering wheel is wrapped in Napa leather, and it feels really good to the touch. It's flat bottomed, so that feels good too, and we still have those pesky touch sensitive commands on the two spikes for the steering wheel. The leather used on the remaining of the interior is white. It feels decent to the touch. It's quite nice that we have these blue contrasting stitching over here, and we have some perforated leather on the center of the seat. The seats themselves, they offer a lot of support. They look good, they feel good, so nothing to complain over here. But I do have to mention that if you want to connect Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, you have to use a wire, and it's a USB Type-C connection over here, so you might want to keep that in mind later on. As for the room, well, I have plenty of room for my head and my body, so no issues in this regard either. What separates the GLB the most compared to the GLA, however, is the room you have in the back, because this car was created specifically to offer more room. So as you can see, I have a lot of room in the back of this car. I would even dare say there's more than in the GLC or the EQC. So the driver's seat is adjusted in my comfortable driving position, and I'm 6 feet tall and about 250 pounds. And look how much room I still have in the back. Headroom, well, it's decent. I do touch it just a little bit, but I wouldn't have an issue going for longer trips in the back of this car whatsoever. Furthermore, the seats have been displaced in an amphitheater kind of layout. So basically the seats in the back are positioned a bit higher compared to the seats in the front, in order for the rear passengers to have a better look up the road on longer trips. So that's welcome as well. Furthermore, the seats in the back can be configured so that they slide front and back, and they have adjustable backrests as well. So you can adjust them however you want to, depending on your needs to load stuff in the back, or maybe you want to you prefer to offer more room for the rear occupants, you can do that. So this was implemented because, as I said, the GLB, the car that's, you know, the basis for this one, can be configured with 7 seats. Now that we hopped behind the wheel of the new Mercedes-Benz EQB, let's talk about the technical side of things. As I mentioned already, this car is built on the same platform as its internal combustion brother, the GLB, but the main difference is that this is an electric car. So therefore I should probably point out that on this car, the EQB 300 4Matic, we have 2 electric motors, as you would expect, because this is an all-wheel drive car, one for the front axle, one for the rear axle, and together they can deliver up to 228 horsepower and 390 Newton meters of torque. And that's plenty of power for most people. It's not going to turn this car into a blazing fast model on the road, because it's also quite a heavy car. It tips the scales at 2.175 tons, close to 2.2 tons. So it's a pretty heavy car due to the massive battery that's hidden in the floor. Its usable capacity is 66.5 kilowatt hours, and according to Mercedes-Benz, it should offer you a range of around 400 kilometers in the WLTP test cycle. However, that will vary depending on a number of factors, from the size of the wheels to the shape of the wheels to the tires used, temperature, and all sorts of things. So when we're talking about electric car range, we should keep all these factors in check, and we should remember that the numbers provided by the car manufacturers are probably in the best case scenario range. They're not a guaranteed distance you can cover with a car, no matter what type of driving you're doing with it. Think of the internal combustion engine cars. They do have a specified fuel consumption figure in their technical documentation, but that's also a best case scenario. You're not going to reach those numbers easily, or at all in some cases. So this car's best case scenario should be about 400 kilometers of range. Now, during my time with the car, I did my usual real life range test. You can find it on my channel. It's the video published before this one. And I noticed that around town you get about 330 kilometers of range. On a set of B roads, I got about 390 kilometers of range, doing an average speed of about 70 kilometers an hour. And on the highway at 130 kilometers an hour, the range was about 270 kilometers. So it's okay, but it's not exactly class leading in any way. But it gets pretty close to the numbers quoted by Mercedes-Benz. However, the temperature was absolutely perfect for this sort of test, and we are riding on special electric car tires. They are Pirelli P0 Electro tires that have been designed specifically for electric cars, and so on. So the mix of factors that I took into account when I did my real life range test have been playing in favor of this car. Now, we should also probably talk about the recharging process. Well, I was surprised to learn that on AC power, this car doesn't take 22 kilowatts. This car can only recharge with AC power up to 11 kilowatts, which is disappointing, especially since Mercedes invested a lot of time in creating 22 kilowatt charging systems for its plug-in hybrid cars. So that was a bit disappointing to learn, but you can also use fast chargers for this car up to 113 kilowatts. And if you get one such charger, you should recharge your battery from 5% to 80% in about 30 minutes, which is actually pretty good. But other than that, you know, if you're charging it at home and you have a wall box that can deliver 7.4 or 11 kilowatts, you could probably recharge this car in 10 or 8 hours, 7 hours, depending on how empty the battery is. But for daily driving, I think the range is more than enough, and you can even use a normal wall socket to recharge it at home overnight. So that shouldn't really be an issue. It will be an issue when you go outside the city limits, and especially if you buy this car with 7 seats, because yes, you can buy it with 7 seats just like the GLB. It's an option. It costs roughly €1,000, and it adds 2 extra seats in the back. So you should, however, keep in mind the fact that if you do load it up with 7 people, the range will drop considerably because the energy consumption will go up because of the weight. So you really should keep that in mind. So you shouldn't really rely on the results I got driving all alone in the car in perfect conditions if you're doing the math for a longer trip. As far as how the car drives, well, you can instantly tell this is based on an internal combustion engine platform that was adapted for an electrified powertrain, because the suspension is decent in most situations, but over harsh-edged bumps it will dance around a little. It will get a bit uneasy on you, and that's because of the extra weight piled on by the battery in the floor. this car's platform was initially designed for a specific weight, and now you have about 500 kilos of extra weight on top of that. So the suspension had to be reinforced. I'm not saying it is a stiff suspension, it's just lacking some refinement. And also I was disappointed by just how noisy it is. Over certain bumps in the road, or over when you're hitting, I don't know, tram lines like the ones to my left, there's an ample amount of sound coming in through the cabin from the wheel wells and the suspension, and that's surprising. It's almost as bad as I found out on the E-Class without the air suspension that I had about 2 years ago, which was also disappointing in this regard. I don't know why this is happening. It's not what a Mercedes-Benz customer is expecting, and it's definitely not on par with the brand. The brand has been known over the years to deliver exquisite suspensions, and this one just falls short of that high target of what we've been getting used to. But the power delivery is smooth in most situations. You won't have any power or any problems in putting it down. The car does have 2 electric motors, but you should know that only one of them is used most of the time, the rear one, in order to make the car more efficient. Whenever the car feels like it needs more traction or more power, the front one is engaged as well. There's an exception to that rule. That's the sport mode. So whenever you're driving in sport mode, both motors will be activated, just to make sure you have everything at your disposal whenever you're driving. And the car drives pretty well. It does lean a bit in the corners, and you do feel the weight, but it's not as bad as you may seem, because the instant torque does help out to mask this problem, this weight problem, as it happens in most electric cars. So yeah, it drives pretty well. It's not a sprinter, it's not a fast car, it's not a sports car. You'll do 100 kilometers an hour from standstill in 8 seconds, and the top speed is 160 kilometers an hour. So it's not exactly a neck-breaking car, but for most people, for families, it will be okay. The sound installation is pretty good. It is on par with Mercedes-Benz's standards, and it does its job really well even at highway speeds. And by the way, you can do a lot of overtaking up to about 130, 140 kilometers an hour, but remember, your top speed is 160, so you are pushing towards the superior limit of this car. Another thing that works in its favor is the high driving position. I mean, you have a very good overview of what's happening around you, up front, to the sides, and especially in the back, where the rear window is pretty big and quite upright. So that's something that plays in favor of this car. But overall, I liked it. I mean, its rivals might be a bit more accomplished. I'm talking about the ID4. I'm including the Skoda Enyaq in here too, because that's a brilliant car, even though it's not necessarily a premium one. But you do have the Audi Q4 to rival with this car. I would even go as far as saying the BMW iX3 is a rival for this car, even though I know it's in a different segment. I know the BMW iX1 will be a rival for this car, but that's yet to come at the time of filming. I know it's coming this year, but I don't know exactly when. What else? The EQA could be considered a rival. They're basically the same car, but this is a more practical choice. And between the two, I would get this one. It offers a lot more room inside. So yeah, pricing, well, over here in Romania, where I'm filming these videos, pricing for this car starts at about 54,000 euros, of course. And the car, as you see it configured over here, has a price of 72,000, and that includes all the optional features I've been talking about. Includes the edition package with those 20-inch wheels and some other details on it. So it's quite expensive, but it is a Mercedes-Benz. It's a Mercedes-Benz electric SUV, so you would expect it to be expensive. That said, this has been my review of this car. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. If you didn't, hit the dislike button. No offense taken if you didn't like this video. But if you find the information I provide useful, please consider subscribing to my channel to help it grow. Until next time, don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.